left-hand. Oh God, that's... Ow! Hey everyone, let's get right into it. I've been so uninspired when I'm out plein air painting and I see a beautiful subject and I try to capture it, knowing that in the studio I could do such a better job with my nice paper. Using watercolor is already difficult enough, and if you use crappy paper, it makes it even worse. And then you will feel like it's your fault. Paper can play such an important role in how our paintings turn out. Obviously you have to have skills, but the paper does make a difference. So I decided, instead of sacrificing the quality of my supplies just because I'm outside, I would do what I have been wanting to do forever and make my own sketchbook using my favorite watercolor paper, which is the Arches Cold Press. I can't afford to buy one of the fancy sketchbooks on the market right now. I already had tons of supplies lying around my house, so I thought I would take you on this journey with me and show you how I made this sketchbook. So let's go. First of all, there are a few very high quality 100% cotton paper sketchbooks on the market, but as I mentioned, they can get pretty pricey. I honestly wish that I could afford these. In this video, I'll show you all of the materials I used, my process, and later I'll review how much the entire thing cost me. So let's get started with what I used. Safety first, guys. Please exercise caution when you're doing your DIY projects. After I collected all my materials, I just started with the covers, and I didn't really know what I was doing, so I just started by cutting down the boards to the size I wanted, as well as the fabric that would wrap the cover. It's been so long since I've done like a crafty DIY thing like this, so I was a little bit rusty, but I just tried to approach it with a logical mindset. Like, what do I have to do first in order to do the next step and then the next step? For my covers, I decided for the front cover I wanted it to be a little bit lighter, so I was using this hardboard that is slightly flexible. It's actually what I use to back my prints when I sell my prints. And for the back cover of the sketchbook, I wanted it to be very hard so that I had like a nice sturdy surface when I was drawing or painting. And I ended up using these MDF boards that I usually gesso and use for oil painting. So that worked out pretty well. Before I put the fabric on, I thought it would be easier if I did little pre-cut holes that would later be where the rings would go to bind the covers together. At first I thought it would be fine if I just had 2 holes, and then later I decided to add a third one in the middle. And I also realized by the end I didn't really need to do these pre-cut holes because it was really easy to drill through the whole thing. Now when it came to gluing the fabric to this board, I had no idea what to do, but the only strong glue I had in the house was this Gorilla Glue. And I started applying it to the board and realized it was just like super hard to spread out, and then I read the directions and found out you're supposed to get the material a little bit wet first. So that was another quick lesson, but luckily it didn't affect it too much. You have about 15 minutes of work time, I think it said, to use it before you have to start clamping things down. So up until this point, I've used about $2 in materials, so I wasn't too worried about messing up. I was considering this my beta version of the cover, and I was just, winging it and just going with it in the moment, figuring it out as I went. And I highly recommend that you do little tests if you aren't familiar with your materials. So again, at this point, I'm thinking, oh, I'm actually supposed to clamp this down. Okay. So I start looking around my desk and I see these notebook clamps that I had. Just throw those on there and decide to leave it and just see what happens. And as that was drying, I decided to work on the back cover. And at first I was going to upholster the back cover as well, but then as I thought about it, I realized I would rather just have the back be a very, very sturdy and durable surface and just be pretty raw and rough. It don't need it to be fancy or anything. The ultimate purpose of this back is to serve as a really hard surface for me to press on while I'm drawing and painting. I wasn't sure how sturdy this MDF was, so I decided to start with smaller drill holes and then step up in size so that I didn't end up cracking the board. But by the end I realized I really didn't have to do that because this stuff is pretty sturdy. Then it was time to cut my paper, and at first I was an absolute idiot. Like, I was so tempted to cut this footage out because I could not believe what I did. But, you know, another lesson learned. Maybe this will help someone out there who's going to do this on their own. So, what is that rule they say? Measure twice, cut once? Yeah, that's a good rule. I should have remembered that. So what happened is that I measured from the holes to the edge of the sketchbook rather than the entire size of the sketchbook, which would mean that my paper would not reach past the holes on one side. I know that sounds confusing, but you'll see in a minute. After I cut all this paper, this glorious, beautiful Arches paper, I realized I cut the wrong size. This is actually a technique where you tear the edges of the paper rather than cut it, so the right side of the paper has a nice deckled edge on it. If you want to learn about that, I actually posted a video how to do that like years ago. It's one of the first videos I posted, I think. It's probably kind of cringy, but it works. And it's bad enough that I did this for so many pages, but I also did it with my toned paper. So I got really far in the process before I realized I had even made a mistake. I'm gonna count down to this moment of devastation for you. 3, 2, 1. Oh God. How evil is Wolfie for laughing at me? He looked at me and he just instantly knew what I had done wrong. Let me show you what I mean. So if I put the paper down in front of the holes, you can see that the paper doesn't even reach the other side. So those initial 2 holes that I had punched would not even hold the paper in the sketchbook. So after I became a smart person again, I went back and started cutting the new paper at the right size. And in the end, I realized, it's not a waste. The paper I had cut already was a 9x7 size, I believe. So that's actually one of my favorite sizes to work in. And I'll just use those pieces of paper for future small paintings. And I wanted to mention that I'm actually using the paper that came out of a paper block. The glue on the edge of the paper block had started to come apart, so it was actually kind of annoying to work in the paper block, and so using these loose sheets of paper for something good like a sketchbook made me really happy. The next day on stream, I decided to go ahead with the cover. Even with my makeshift clamps, the glue held very tightly to the fabric and the board, so that worked great. I wanted to mention that if you're interested in making your own fancy covers and in doing like proper permanent binding for your sketchbook, there's a really amazing YouTuber that I found called Sea Lemon. She makes the most amazing, high quality, extremely thorough and easy to follow tutorials, and I feel like it's just an amazing source of information for this kind of thing. So go check her out if you are starting to get into this. Biggest downside to using this flexible board for the cover is that when I stretched the fabric, it slightly bent the board, and because the fabric was held on so tightly, it ended up slightly warping the final cover. It's so slight that it doesn't bother me at all, especially because this is like my own personal handmade sketchbook. I still feel really like pleased with the results, and but anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Like, if you want your cover to be very tight fabric but also not warped, you probably want to use something a little bit thicker. My initial thought was that I wanted the cover to be very, very lightweight because the back of my cover, or the back cover for this sketchbook, is so heavy because I wanted that really sturdy surface. So you know, I feel like I could have gone a little thicker on the cover and it would have been fine. A few days later, my metal rings arrived, so it was finally time to bind everything. I had to punch the holes in the paper first, and I actually don't own a 3-hole punch, but I do have a single hole punch. Don't ask me why. So in order to do this, I had to trace the holes on every single page, and then I would punch the individual holes out. Yeah. Some of you guys who collect stationery supplies are probably totally cringing. This video is showing how much of a noob I am. But you know, I barely spent any money on this whole process. I owned everything you see except those metal rings, which were like 3 or 4 pounds. So in the end, I was okay with doing a little bit more work and just like trying to find these creative solutions for my problems along the way, because it was so cheap. Or I mean, it's not like it was free, because at some point in my life I bought all these materials, but it's not like I had to go out and splurge 50 pounds on an Arches sketchbook to get what I wanted. All right, we're almost done. I wanted to show you how I finished off the front cover, because as you saw, the inside of the cover was just like loose fabric and exposed glue spots, kind of ugly. So what I did was I took the same exact board that the fabric is wrapped around, that nice like hard cardboard stock, whatever you want to call it, and I traced the edge, and then I cut inwards about 2 to 3 millimeters so that it would be on the inside of the cover with just like a little bit of a overhang with the fabric. Then I glued it a ton. Time to check it. Let's see how we did. Ooh. This looks so good! Yay! At this point, I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. I just had to drill the hole in the cover, which was so easy, and then I had to add the rings and then the paper. I think I was dancing in my chair at this point. It was just smooth sailing from here on out, and any of you who have attempted to do a DIY project that you at first feel like you're in over your head, you know this feeling of triumph and just pure excitement because you're just moments away from finishing it. I did it! Wolfie was very supportive of my triumph, so yeah, he's not so bad. So here we have it, the final result. I was so happy to wake up and see this sitting on my desk. It has a sturdy and lightweight cover that's nice and finished with internal board and fabric on the outside. It has 14 pages of Arches cold press, 300 GSM paper complete with deckled edges, as well as an adjustable binding so I can add or remove pages as I please, as well as 5 pages of toned paper which I can do value studies and sketches on, and a nice sturdy back so that I don't struggle when I'm sitting outside painting. So in the end, what did all of this cost? As I mentioned, I already owned everything except the metal rings, so I had to look back at old email receipts between 2016 and now to find out what I spent on everything. But after lots of digging, I had my numbers and it was time to put my rusty math skills to test. The Arches paper block was by far the most expensive item, coming in at a whopping $87.72. Which breaks down to £4.38 per sheet, and since I could get pages out of each sheet, my book contained £10.22 of 5 sheets of toned paper. That is a grand total of £13.41. That's about $16.47, or about 15 euros. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching this process. Let me know if you have any questions about it. I'm also going to be posting a plein air painting soon, the first page in my sketchbook. It's actually been snowing for the last couple of days. Yeah, it's May and it's snowing. Love Scotland's weather. So once it gets a little bit warmer, I will head out there and do the first page, and then I will share that with you guys. But for now, I hope you're all staying healthy and inspired, and I'll see you again soon.